How to write off travel legally. Have you ever thought to yourself, I want to go to Costa Rica and I want to go to Jamaica, or I want to go to the Amalfi Coast or Morocco or some great island and put this in my business's name and have my business write off the whole thing? I know you've seen these trends on Instagram and different social media platforms where they're telling you can take these amazing trips and write the whole thing off because it's a business trip. Well, in this episode, I am a multi-millionaire entrepreneur. I'm going to break down how you actually can write off the travel legally and what is required so that you can do it without, getting in the orange jumpsuit. All right, let's go.
Noelle. Yeah, she can fix that. You gotta get it done, no, you need to do it better. Well, she can fix that, yeah, she can fix that. Investment to get back, trying to get a big stack. She can fix that, let's fix that.
So let's get right into it. I know you want to go to the islands and you want to go to the Caribbean and you want to write the whole trip off because you have a business. Well, I'm going to break down what you actually need in order to do that because it is very, very specific. I have great accountants and I have great lawyers and I can tell you exactly how to get it done and how to get yourself in a lot of trouble. Number one, you must have a real business. I know this sounds like, duh, Noelle, of course you have to have a real business, but I don't mean just go to the Secretary of State and file an LLC and now you can go to Costa Rica, all expenses on your new business. No, that is not how that works. You actually have to have a real business with transactions. So again, you're going to have the whole business outline. You're going to have an LLC. You're going to have the EIN. But more importantly, you should probably have an accounting system that has transactions in it. So you have a business checking account that shows that you have sales, that shows that you pay into things, you pay people and you buy things and you buy inventory and the profits come and it can show transactions in your actual business account. And then you actually have to have accounting software where it's kind of tied up. So there is some type of accounting and they can start to categorize your expenses. But if you do not actually have a business that actually does transactions and it's just a business that you put on paper that just takes losses, it never makes any money and it's just loss after loss, year after year, that's probably not going to be a business that's going to make sense for you to travel in order for it to be a business purpose. So if you don't have a real business with real transactions and a business checking account and merchant processing and QuickBooks or FreshBooks or whatever accounting software that's tracking and keeping track of what you spend in your business, you're most likely not even going to be eligible to even start thinking about traveling for business. So of course, if you have a business, you do stuff and you're doing things in your business, you got some transactions, you accept credit cards, you buy inventory, you sell things, you have clients, great.
Nice.
Now let's get to the second thing. There are two ways that you can take this trip now legally. Now that you have a real business, let's talk about what you would need to take these trips legally. It's two parts. One, it must be ordinary and necessary for your business. So it's a trip that you're going to take that seems ordinary for your business. So if you're, for example, you run spas and you're going to go to Costa Rica because they're having a spa convention, for example, and they're teaching you about how to increase sales in your spa and, some new massages and new techniques and different things like that. That may qualify because that's the first part. It must be ordinary and necessary for your business. That's part A. Part B, the trip must be primarily for business. So you can't go to Costa Rica for this convention and spend no time at the convention. You just spend it laying on the beach and doing excursions and skinny dipping and snorkeling and all of these other excursions and activities that have nothing to do with your business. Then it wouldn't qualify, and those expenses for the scuba diving and the snorkeling and all that stuff would not be something that you could write off. However, if you spend most of the time at the conference, that's what you went there for, and you're learning different things for your business and it's really taking to the next level, but you also went to the beach or you did maybe an excursion, that may be something that you could write off because again, it was ordinary and necessary for your business. And two, the trip itself was primarily for business. You did not spend most of the time doing personal things. You spent most of the time doing business things. So let's break this down a little bit further, because again, you can't just go to the conference, and some people try to just go and say that, hey, this was the whole trip was about, and then they get audited and they run into some problems. So you want to think about how much time are you going to be spending there for business? Start tracking that. Start thinking about that. If the conference is all day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then you just go on to the beach or whatever after that, and that was just 4 hours of that, but 8 hours of this, start breaking down the time even before you go there on how you're going to be spending the trip. You should actually document this before you go on the trip. We'll talk about that a little bit earlier because there is some documentation that's required. But again, as you're going through your mind and you're even booking this trip using maybe a business credit card to further that this is for a business expense, and you've put together the tickets for the conference, for example, and the hotel and all of these different things, and you've kept the receipts. But again, before you even go, think about how much time you are going to be spending for business, and make sure before you even go, you've mapped out that you are going to spend most of the time for the business purpose. This is a business trip. You need to think about that and make sure you're planning in advance how this is a business trip, why this is necessary for the business, and allocate how much time you are going to be spending for the business, being very purposeful, deliberate, and intentional that most of the time that you spend there is going to be for the business. Let's keep going. Number 3, documentation. Now that you have the business and you're able to go, and now 2, you already know that yes, this trip is for business, and yes, this is normal for my business. Now we got to get into the documentation, because if you really want to write this off legally, you can if you have the right documentation. So let's talk about that. 1, you're going to need receipts for everything. So when you're buying the ticket, for example, the plane, the ticket to the hotel, the travel from the airport to the hotel, all of those, keep those receipts, keep the documentation for everything that you are spending money on. Again, categorizing it purposely as an expense for the business and for the business travel. They should be things that make sense, like a plane ticket. Yes, that's how you had to get there. Yes, I had to take a taxi from the airport to the hotel. That makes sense. Oh, I went snorkeling. Well, maybe that doesn't make sense for it being a part of the business, because it has to, all of the documentation and the receipts that you keep are going to line up, and you're going to make sure that they line up, that this is a business trip and it should have been for a business. So number 1, receipts of the amount spent. That's really easy. Number 2, the place of travel. Where you're going, not just the hotel or the different place, but if you have to go off of the hotel or off of the resort, exactly where you went. Maybe the conference is not at the hotel that you're staying in, and then there's travel to the location of where exactly the conference, for example, using that as an example, is going to be. Again, the place of travel. Number 3, the business purpose must be clearly defined, and you need to actually think about that before you go on the trip, not after you come back and you get audited as to why you took it. So the business purpose should be clearly defined. And then number 4, the business relationship of the people involved. So if you're traveling by yourself, that's fine. But if you're actually traveling with your assistant, if you're traveling with an assistant manager or the chief operations officer or whatever different role you have in the company, all of the people that are traveling and involved in this, you need to account for and think about and have documentation for. Now, let's take a quick sidebar. The people that you are traveling with. I have seen so many different, social media posts about you could travel with your whole family and write the whole thing off. Noelle Randall is a mom of 5. I have some 8-year-old twins. Would love to go to Jamaica and bring my twins with me and my husband, and we write this whole thing off. Well, let me stop you there. Traveling with your spouse and your dependents is going to be a bigger issue. Like I said, the people involved, who you are traveling with, must make sense in order for this to be a write-off. If you are taking your spouse or your dependents, they must be employees of your company. They cannot just be on the board of directors. I know I have seen people on social media saying you just make them the board of director and bam, you are off to Costa Rica with your 8-year-old. No, sir. No, ma'am. The IRS is not going to be going for that. They want to see that person is an actual employee of the company. So W-2. Now, I have seen it where it was an independent contractor and you truly have put your kids and they received a 1099, but they should have already received that 1099, and that should have already been documented in previous year's tax returns. If now you're going to bring them on a trip and say that they are a part of your company, I strongly suggest you already establish in prior year's returns that they were a part of the company, not just immediately you added your son to it and then took him to Costa Rica with you. So again, think through the dependents and the spouses, because in many cases, they probably are not going to be eligible to travel with you for this business trip and be a part of the write-off. Number two, they would also have to be not only a part of the business, they would have to make sense as to what their role is in the business that they came with you to Costa Rica. So if you're bringing your spouse, and yes, your spouse very well could be a part of your business. Mine is a part of my business. The previous people have been a part of my business, but it has to actually be their role. So like they're the assistant manager, or they're the chief operations officer, or they are some key player and member of my business. And it makes sense that they came on this trip. And then also, if they were not your spouse or your dependent, would their travel have been reimbursable? That is the third caveat. So if this person was not my spouse and I brought him with me to Costa Rica, if he was just an irregular employee, would this trip have been a write-off? Would this have been something that I would have had to reimburse this person for? Then most likely, then yes, I could now write them off for coming with me, because it makes sense that outside of their role, if they would have just been not related to me in any way, shape, or form, I would have had to reimburse them for this travel. Now we've kind of met all of the bullets that we need to say, okay, we can legally write this off. But let me keep going, because there's just a couple more. Again, I want you to be able to tie up all the loose ends before you even book this trip, because you can make it make sense. You just got to think about it a little bit. Let me keep going. Real quick, tell me what you think in the chats. I love to talk about this stuff. So many people have asked me this question about writing off travel and traveling with their family, their kids, their spouses. They're seeing all this stuff on social media. Let's have a conversation about that in the comments. Chat with me. Let's talk about it. I will respond. Now let's talk about international travel, because that is something separate. So we talked about travel, and people want to travel to Costa Rica and Jamaica, and they want to go to Australia. They want to go to these great trips that they've never been on and get this through their business and write the whole thing off. But international travel is a whole different ball game, and it's actually more strict than having travel within the United States. Let me explain. In the IRS code 247H, demonstrate that foreign location was necessary for business purpose. So what that basically means, if you're traveling to Costa Rica for this meeting or whatever, this conference, that should be necessary for what you're doing. If there was a place that you could have done this in the United States or in the state that you live in, like I live in Florida, and for me to go to Costa Rica for certain things just doesn't even make sense. And when it comes to international travel, the IRS gets even more strict. They want to know that it was required or even kind of necessary. It has to even make sense, basically. And you must demonstrate that it makes sense that you have to do this in a foreign location. So going to Australia for these meetings and going off the coast of the Amalfi Coast and all of these amazing places in the Caribbean that these people on Instagram are telling you about, that's going to be a hard sell, because again, they are actually more stricter with international travel. You're usually less scrutinized. And again, I'm about to give you Noelle Randall's opinion. You talk to your own accountant, you talk to your own attorney for sure before you take any advice. But now I'm about to just give you my opinion. It usually is easier, even with your accountants, my attorneys, if I do something in the United States, even if it's travel. So if I travel to New York, for example, I'm in Florida and I travel to New York, or if I travel to Texas, or if I travel to California, those travel expenses are usually way less scrutinized than if I said I needed to go to Costa Rica, or if I need to go to Paris. That international travel is so much more stricter that even accountants, true accountants, they kind of cringe when you want to write off those things, because you really have to demonstrate that you needed to go to a foreign country in order to do this. And remember, this is the United States government, the United States IRS. They are really too keen on you going to give your money to another country and then writing that off on their dime. So you might want to be a little careful with that. Let's get back to this. So here's the final recap. I'm going to put it on the screen. Number one, you have to have a real business. This needs to be a real business, not just you have an LLC with the Secretary of State and you got the EIN. No, you're going to have some transactions. You most likely going to need QuickBooks and show that you've really been doing business and that you have not just been losing money. There has actually been some profits that make sense for you to actually invest and go to a different place in order to do the business conference or class or whatever you're saying that you're going there for. But obviously classes and courses and seminars and workshops, things like that usually at least make some sense, and usually can at least talk to your accountant to see, but it has to be a real business. That is number one. Number two, It needs to be primarily for business purposes. You cannot go to Seattle to go see your aunt and then have one little 10-minute meeting or a call that you did in a cafe and say that that is primarily for business purposes. You really need to document it. You should think about it before you even leave on the trip, how much time you're going to spend on the business, and make the trip primarily for business purposes. And then kind of, don't do all of the personal stuff with the business credit card, of course. Number 3, strict documentations are required for international travel. Please know that if you are doing this in a foreign country and you want to go to Costa Rica, you want to go to Paris and do some of these things, the documentation for international and foreign places are going to be much more strict. Number 4, family is probably not covered unless they're actually a W-2 employee of the company with a track record that they have been working and their position makes sense for you to travel. Most likely your spouses and your dependents and all of those aunts and uncles, most likely they are not going to qualify. But again, if you have the documentation to prove, then maybe some of your family members that work in the business might be able to come and you might be able to write that off legally. Number 5, an international trip requires you to define why it was not in North America. They're going to want to know why you needed to go to a foreign country in order to achieve this. So not only is there strict documentation requirements for any travel that you're writing off, but please note that international travel has an even higher standard and a higher amount of documentation. It's more strict because they really want to know why this was done in a foreign country instead of being done in the United States. Okay, you need to take yourself to the next level. Readers are leaders. You can get my 4 best-selling books absolutely free. Just go to noellsbookoffer.com. My book, Millionaire Business Secrets, will share all the secrets to a successful millionaire business. There are tons of write-offs, tons of ways to get funding, tons of ways to build credit, tons of ways to not borrow in your business's name, how to take your business to the next level, and so much more. These 4 books are how I became a multimillionaire, how I've been able to establish businesses and recreate them over and over and turn them into successes. There is so much knowledge in these 4 books that you can get absolutely free just by going to noellsbookoffer.com. The books are free. You just cover the shipping. These are my 4 best-selling books. They have been selling like crazy. You want to go there right now and get your copies and we will ship them out immediately. That's noellsbookoffer.com. Noelle, Noelle with an S, book, BOOK, offer, OFFER. Go right now, get all 4 of these books. You just cover the shipping. They have so much information that will help change your life. I give you all the secrets to my success and so much more. Why? Because I want to make sure that you have all of the knowledge, all of the tools, and all of the resources that you need to be successful. This is Noelle Randall. To your success. All right, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and please give me a thumbs up. It helps so much. I have shared all of this great information with you and I wanted you to just help me out by sharing this with anyone that you think it can help. Again, I am here for you. Go ahead, subscribe.